Leading people to accept and embrace change is not easy, yet it is the nearly constant challenge of leadership. The good news is that much is known about the psychology behind why people resist change and leadership skills that can help people overcome their natural resistance. In this mission, you'll learn about the neuroscience behind how people react to change and begin developing your understanding of how to help people accept and even embrace change. Let's look at the challenges we intend to overcome. There's no getting around it. We live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous VUCA business environment. Change is constant. As leaders, we help our people deal with this change in two ways. We clearly communicate the need for change and the direction we are heading based on our strategy, and we motivate our people to execute change through meaningful dialogue about the change and by advocating for needed resources and removal of barriers for our people. Our role in leading people through change is the VUCA antidote. We are advocates for vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. Bob Johansen, Distinguished Fellow at the Institute for the Future, was credited with naming the antidote to VUCA, which he called VUCA Prime. Volatility can be countered with vision. While our senior leaders are primarily responsible for creating that vision, as change leaders, it's our responsibility to communicate that vision effectively. From clear vision comes the opportunity to transform uncertainty into understanding, bringing all team members into a shared mindset and understanding of how they can contribute to success, along with the key operating principles that will promote active communication and widespread change involvement practices. If we have done the hard work of early change adoption, our understanding should be solid enough to help other people understand why change is needed. Complexity can be countered by clarity. That comes from constantly reinforcing the important change priorities and avoiding non-value-added activities. Finally, ambiguity can be countered with agility. Here again, our own agile response to early change adoption will help us lead others along a similar path. As a leader of change, job number one is making sure we are certain of the vision for change, that we understand why the change is needed, and we are clear on what we must let go of and what we must embrace to make the change a reality. Only then will we have the ability to navigate the surprises that almost always come with change and be able to inspire others to the same agility. So these are the challenges of our modern VUCA world. Now let's consider the biology and psychology of why so many people seem to want to resist change. Researcher Carol Dweck found that 80% of children she studied gave up on solving difficult problems, while only 20% had the resilience and determination to continue trying to solve the difficult puzzle they were trying to work out. She called this phenomena having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. When faced with change, most of us think the consequences of mistakes are bad. This naturally leads to fear and resistance, covering up, avoidance, a lack of honesty, gossip, hidden resistance, and giving up after just one or two tries. So you can see that part of our job as leaders of change is to help people begin to see that mistakes are just a part of learning. It is important that we see mistakes as failures, not as failures, but rather as opportunities, to be accountable for our actions and not to shift blame to others. This mindset promotes growth, believing that we grow and learn by taking risks and making mistakes or failing. Each time this happens during change, it's an opportunity to take lessons learned away from the experience and establish new best practices, creating an environment where we embrace change and honest mistakes. We must create an open and blame-free environment, yet engage team members in understanding the root cause of failure so they can avoid it in the future. Continual improvement is about creating new best practices when failures occur. This is how we create a learning organization that adapts to change with agility. Let's turn now to a second major finding from the neuroscience of human behavior, that in addition to a fixed or growth mindset, we can also generally be feeling in one of two states, a positive towards state or a resistant away state. I think you will all find this feels familiar. Have you ever had a job where you woke up dreading to go to work? That was an away state. When you want to jump out of bed on Monday morning, that's what we call a toward state. Those feelings are indicative of what two primary emotional states we can be in at any given time. We are either feeling good, motivated, and ready to go, or we're lethargic, demotivated, and feeling anxious. As leaders, our actions help create a culture where people are excited about their jobs or where they're just going through the motions. Our actions and the shadow we cast, especially since we are the primary point of communication during times of change, can either amplify the toward state or the away state, feelings in other people. Our language, our actions, the way we treat others can either trigger stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, or feel-good hormones like serotonin, the key hormone of happiness, or dopamine, the pleasure hormone that is released when you strive towards a goal, or oxytocin, which has been called the love and trust hormone. So let's summarize the impact of our change leadership behaviors. These are some of the common consequences we'll notice as role models and advocates of change who are trying to stay adaptive to the nearly constant change in our world. The way you deal with change and mistakes has a big impact on the way your team adapts to change. It's clear that we want to encourage and model growth mindset behaviors and eliminate fixed mindset behaviors as much as possible. In the coming missions, we will equip you with many skills to help make that happen. For now, let's turn to understanding the process people go through to overcome resistance to change by looking at the ladder of accountability and the change curve. Accountability is an important consideration for a leader of change. The accountability ladder is a simple way to think about change resilience versus change resistance. Notice that people feel powerless at the bottom rungs of this ladder. Unexpected change can make us feel powerless for many reasons. They catch us off guard. We feel like change is being forced upon us. We feel like a victim to the change. We may like the status quo and want to wait and hope the change will simply go away. As someone being asked to role model change resistance, why do you think acknowledging reality is the first rung of the ladder that moves people into a state of feeling powerful in the face of change? When you acknowledge reality and accept what is, quickly, then you have more time to adapt. You avoid time wasted feeling victimized. You can seek to understand why the change is so important, and you can begin experimenting with new behaviors required to navigate the change. As a change leader, you must role model getting to this acceptance as quickly as possible. Your example alone will help your people do the same. Well, that's the change ladder. There is another model of change that can be very useful. It's called the change curve. Think about yourself, your team, and your leadership in relation to the change curve. What type of change tends to bring the strong reactions you see on the left side of this curve? You probably thought of things like big changes of great magnitude, changes that threaten job security, changes that involve health and safety risks, highly emotional changes where relationships can be threatened or lost, changes that threaten our power and our position. Take a moment right now to think of a change you're currently experiencing. Where are you on this change curve? How about your team? Are they in the same spot or a different spot? How about your leadership? When you think about it, everyone experiences this change curve differently. People feel the emotions to greater or lesser degrees. Some of us move through the curve quickly. Others may struggle moving through it. So how could a change leader deal with big, dramatic changes? First, You need to work through your own resistance so you can help others. The other key thing to keep in mind is that the bigger the change, the more important it is to allow for emotional expression from your team. Understanding the change curve deeply will help you help others navigate change successfully. So let's take a deeper look. In actuality, there are often 3 dips in performance when work processes change. The first is when organizations use a big band approach to announcing the change. This is usually done with great fanfare or during an all-hands meeting. Regardless of how the change is announced, the message is broad and generic. It leaves uncertainty for how employees will be impacted. The second dip is aligned to training deployment. When employees are learning new skills, they work slower, are more thoughtful with the steps they're taking, and may need support. Productivity is often impacted as they learn how to work in new or different ways. The third dip occurs after the change is deployed, and it's seen that what was promised wasn't fully delivered. For example, during a system implementation project, this may look like functionality that wasn't ready at go live, but might be introduced later, or workarounds that are needed because something is not functioning the way it should. At all of these points, deploying change tactics at the right time will help to minimize dips in performance and accelerate the path to adoption. The reason these resistance dips happen at multiple times is because performers aren't just concerned when they hear about the change. That is certainly the first point when they begin to ask questions and get concerned. But employees get concerned at several different points. When communication begins to roll out and people start hearing about the details of the change, either formally or through the grapevine, when employees begin taking training and get concerned that they won't be able to handle the new change, and when the change goes live and employees start dealing with the reality of the differences in their work processes. This is why it's important to have a comprehensive strategy to support leadership, communication, and learning throughout all stages of the change. The solid line represents those dips in performance that occur as a part of change. We apply different strategic change conversations to minimize the performance dips to look more like the dotted blue line. Applying a comprehensive communication strategy by holding several change conversations means keeping employees informed of what's changing, when it's changing, how it impacts them, and how they'll be supported. Engaging employees through different channels to bring them on board and prepare them for what is ahead. Preparing employees through role-specific training and performance tools. Empowering employees to own their role in the transition. Coaching them through personal adoption and meaningful conversations that allow for questions and clarifications. Helping the organization sustain the change and realize the intended benefits. One of the key benefits of this program is to help you learn to have the key change conversations that will make the change dips in your team much shallower. Taking care of team members results in an outstanding customer service, and helping people manage the discomfort of change is a great way to demonstrate that you care. Now that you understand a lot more about how to help people adapt to change, let's look at one last important tip. Before we close this mission, we have one final piece of advice that will help you lead people through the change curve and up the ladder of accountability. You must first lead the way in releasing old ways of doing things and embracing new ways that support the intended change. Here again, your example will be important, especially if you support the organization in change by removing old systems and disabling old ways of doing things. This is about innovation, optimistically asking, how can this be done better? It's about curious and embracing change. It's also important to note, however, that honoring the past and what got us to this point is also really important. As you embrace new ways, be sure not to denigrate the old ways.